kick things off. Great. So welcome everyone to back to Salesforce Security Office Hours. I know we had a little bit break since Dreamforce, but I'm sorry, TDX. So but we're back, and we're welcoming Evelyn today to talk about what developers are getting wrong in security when building Lightning Web Components. It's actually interesting. My book here that Beach was talking about is actually about more about building Aura components, which people are getting wrong, especially with the guest user. So I'm love to be seeing now with Lightning Web Components. This is going to be a great talk. Super excited to hear about that. So we're just going to go through a little bit of housekeeping. Typically, I always like to open up with what are Salesforce security office hours. Try to change up the intro, everyone. But basically, the key tone is, security incidents are on the rise, not falling with Salesforce, unfortunately, especially after 2025, where we saw over 900 orgs that were breached in Salesforce. And so really wanted to create this forum to connect customers with experts who can be talking about various Salesforce security topics every couple weeks and giving people a way and an outlet to be able to get direct connection with those experts to talk about and ask the burning questions you have about what's going on in your orgs and things that you should be doing today to and right now to protect your orgs so you don't get added to that list. The rules of engagement are simple. Just basically be respectful to others. It's open engagement, but just don't interrupt anyone. If you want to ask a question, you can raise your hand, or if nobody's talking, feel free just to ask a question. There's also the Q&A section there if you want to take things. Most importantly, I always tell everyone take notes so you can walk away with something actionable today that you can implement today in your org or take back to your customer to help make a change. Because if we don't make changes, then nothing's going to change, and we're going to continue to see these organizations that are getting breached. Myself, I am Matt Meyers. I am a 19 plus veteran in the Salesforce ecosystem. I'm a CTA and CEO and co-founder of EzProtect. I'm also, as I was mentioning, author of this book here, Securing Salesforce Digital Experiences, which is a fun little story about a customer of mine that I was on a project a while back that actually got breached in their digital experience community, and it's kind of a day in the life novel format of what it was like for the worst day of my life and how what we did about it and what we learned about it, which actually set me on this path. And my mission here really is just to help educate people on how to keep your data safe in Salesforce. So, Evelyn, I'll let you do your intro, and then we'll have a couple more housekeeping items, and we'll kick off the talk.
Yeah. So my name is Evelyn McGuire. You might see me as McMichael-Maguire on LinkedIn. I am 10 times Salesforce certified. I have been CompTIA Security Plus, Network Plus, Server Plus, CNIP certified as well. My bachelor's degree is in Network and Systems Management, so very familiar with network engineering topics. I also just wrote a book, which we will be giving away a copy of at the end of this talk. So we are going to talk a little bit about what's the content of that book, which is the Salesforce Lightning Web Component Cookbook. And I get to make an announcement today. I will be starting at CrowdStrike on Monday. So very excited to share that with everyone on the call. And I will be making that formal announcement on LinkedIn, but I will be fighting the shiny hunters where they live. So very excited. I am also an open source contributor. I am the author and architect of the SFDAD project, which allows you to test your own backup solution. I've been a Rad Women coach, a Clicked coach. I did the original Trailblazer mentorship until the day they shut it down at Mile High Dreamin' in 2023. And my main focus is LWC development, batchable Apex, asynchronous Apex, component security, and enterprise architecture.
Wow, that is amazing. I'm sorry, my intro is nothing compared to yours. So, no, but thank you so much for everything you do for the community. And again, thank you so much for joining and taking some of your time from your busy schedule to help everyone learn about their LWC security. So, EzProtect supports the Salesforce Security Office Hours, so we wouldn't be able to have it without EzProtect. And basically, just for if you guys don't know, and hopefully you do, but Salesforce does now scan for viruses. But so there are a couple options out there, but we started the company because it did not. And we just want, and that's where most of the threats have been coming in over the last year, as we saw was phishing attacks. So if you don't have a solution for phishing or in your Salesforce orgs, maybe, feel free to reach out and we can have a discussion. All right, so let's talk about the last office hours recap. So we like to do that. And so here we basically covered about auditing your connected apps before migrating to your ECAs. So very important to understand what you have before you're moving over, but also still, I would say, if you don't know what it is, then disable that connected app because you could be opening the door to an attacker, but still very important to understand what you have before you're making that transition. It was a very interesting talk. So if you want to be able to watch the replay, feel free to click that QR code or watch the review for this one. So next thing we like to do is hot off the press. Hot off the press this week was we were just talking about that a little bit before is Salesforce apparently has been or has a opt out button to opt out of sharing your data with your customer data and your internal org data with Salesforce, specifically for their AI models, with sharing to help them with learning with the global models and other product related features in Salesforce. Salesforce Ben, and it looks like they initially wrote the article about this. We picked this up and just wanted to surface that. I think a couple of the other things just to note here is if you have your own custom contract, they are respecting the contracts with that. But if you don't, or you haven't previously opted out, you should go find that setting and set up an opt out of Salesforce sharing your data. If you do opt out now, any data that's already been previously shared will be saved for the next around 30 days until it's completely purged from their system with the sharing. So as we said, some people here are going to be talking to their AEs about this, but I think it's something really take a look at that QR code, see the story, and so we can learn a little bit more about what's that and how it impacts you. All right, without further ado, let's get on to the talk at hand with Evelyn about what do Salesforce developers get wrong about security when building their Lightning Web components. I'll hand over the floor to you, Evelyn, and then just I'll try to advance the slides. If I miss something, just let me know.
Yeah, so today we are going to be focusing on Lightning Web Security and Lightning Locker. There are a number of configuration errors that I will touch on as well that fall outside of the purview of these two systems, but these are going to be the main ones. So to sum up, Lightning Web Security is going to isolate JavaScript across namespaces and prevent components from reaching into each other's document object model. And essentially what this means is that custom LWCs that you build yourself cannot reach into managed package LWCs, cannot reach into Salesforce's LWCs. We can communicate with each other, but we can't like actively manipulate the document object model of something that isn't ours. So everything on the other side of that boundary is our responsibility as the developers and architects who are building these Lightning Web components. Most LWC security vulnerabilities are not actually configuration problems. They're code problems that start when we assume that LWS will handle what the code can. So again, while it is definitely possible to have configuration issues, namely that's going to be stuff that would lead to something like cross-site scripting, cross-site request forgery, and socket injection, memory leaks, which we can talk about in a second. Basically, what LWS is going to do is try and catch some of those things for you, but you have to test everything yourself. So if you have not read the LWS Distortion Viewer output for your org's component bundles, definitely do that. And hopefully someone will be able to link the LWS Distortion Viewer in the chat. If Tristan wouldn't mind, that would be great. And go ahead and next slide. So for our two security architectures, we have the Lightning Locker, which is going to use DOM access containment, and that's going to wrap global objects like window, as well as there's some others, but it's going to wrap it in a secure wrapper called, so taking window from window to secure window to prevent cross-framework access. So this is going to happen when you have your third-party JavaScript libraries, and this is going to basically give us the opportunity to say, like in Aura components, you'd say like window refresh and it'd refresh the whole page for you. We are going to have the shadow DOM in Lightning Locker that is going to just like not refresh the whole window. We don't have access to that. Lightning Web Security is the newer framework, though, that replaced Locker as the default for all orgs going forward after Winter 23. And this is going to isolate our JavaScript through that namespace boundaries instead of the DOM lockdown like we just discussed. So Lightning Locker still exists, though. If you are in an org that is older than Winter 23, you have to be aware of the differences between Lightning Locker and Lightning Web Security, which we'll be going into in a little bit. So you can also turn on Lightning Web Security, but there are some caveats with that. So we will go ahead and go into that in a couple of slides. So Locker is going to enforce event retargeting, which means that events dispatched inside of a modal cannot propagate to parent components without a dedicated wrapper component. And one of my favorite projects in the Lightning Web Component Cookbook is in Chapter 7, and you actually build a Lightning Locker compatible modal with the wrapper component, and then you build the Lightning Web Security forwards compatible component with the modal that has that event, not the event retargeting, but the event dispatching within the modal. So we'll have some code snippets there and take a look at that in a second. LWS is going to prevent cross namespace communication and event propagation, which is going to simplify the component architecture, but it shifts the security decision onto you. You have to decide how far your events are going to travel. You have to make sure you're stopping the propagation of the events. And basically, we have to make sure that our event configuration with the bubbles and compose is something that's copacetic with the org. And hopefully this dog does not start barking. So next slide. So we have a line between what the platform secures and what you own. So Lightning Web Security sandboxes JavaScript across namespace boundaries and blocks direct access to another component's DOM. Again, to reiterate, this means that Evelyn's component cannot reach into, I don't know, Litify's component as an ISV partner. I can't reach into Salesforce's component. We can communicate with each other through events and Lightning messaging service, but we cannot reach in and manipulate that document object model. And yes, link to the book. I get distracted by the chat, so don't mind me. So LWS is going to apply some API distortions, and API distortion being a change made to the JavaScript that is going to restrict dangerous browser API calls, and it's going to prevent access to platform globals like Aura and SFDC from the custom code. So where we have the global objects in JavaScript, like window global, there's several others as well. Salesforce has their own global objects called Aura and SFDC, and we basically don't want to access those because that would be reaching into Salesforce's internal components. The important thing is Lightning Web Security does not enforce field level security, CRUD permission checks, or input validation on user-controlled fields. That is what we're going to do with Lightning Data Service or your Apex. LWS also does not protect server-side logic, which is going to include our Aura-enabled controller methods. And it's important to call out, every Aura-enabled controller method is basically a public web interface. So you want to make sure that you are checking permissions, whether you have a structure in, like we do in the Cookbook, where you have a selector class, a service class, a controller class, a domain class. We want to make sure that our selector classes and our domain classes are generally with sharing, except for extenuating circumstances. So again, to reiterate, all Aura-enabled controller methods should be treated as a public web interface. And if your Apex does not check those permissions, LWS will not check them for you, which again, benefit of using Lightning Data Service. Next slide. So for the 6 lines of code that ship a vulnerability, we can use raw Apex for record operations instead of Lightning Data Service. And raw Apex is fine in some circumstances, but when we are updating an S-object with fields, what we can do is we can actually use the Lightning UI record API imports to say, hey, we want to import this field. Instead of storing the field name as a hard-coded text value in our LWC JavaScript, we want to import that field name. We want to import the object's name, and in a similar way that we import our methods from Apex. So this is going to build in our field level security enforcement, and it'll be really helpful for that. We also, there are two properties of events, which are bubbles and composed, where bubbles means that we can travel up the document object model into parental components. So if I have a child component, a parental component, and a grandparental component, the child component can communicate up to the parent, up to the grandparent, and so on and so forth. With the composed property, what that's going to mean is that it can pass the shadow document object model or the shadow DOM boundary. So this is something that I actually gave a talk with Salesforce Ben, and I think I mixed them up in that talk, so I want to make sure I get it right this time. But this is something that if we say setting events to bubbles, true, and composed without understanding, those events are going to travel as far up the document object model as we will let them. So we want to make sure we capture them at some point. And we want to make sure that if we are doing programmatic events versus declarative events, we want to make sure that we decommission the event at the end. And we'll take a look at some code that does that in a second.
Right.
We
I have a quick
also,
question for you on that.
yeah.
I'm sorry interrupting, but just for clarity for everyone. So if you have an event that's bubbling up through the all the way through the grandparents, great grandparents, so forth. If you catch the event, let's say three layers up, will that event stop bubbling, or does it continue bubbling to the very top?
So it should be caught, and that is, it won't stop. So let me think about this for a second. So when we catch the event, it stops bubbling. So in the event that we need to bubble up, say from child to great grandparents, we would say bubbles true, compose true, because likely we're traversing multiple components in that order. We want to cross the shadow boundaries and we want to bubble up. So compose true, bubbles true. And then once we get to that grandparental component, we catch the event and handle it, and then that should stop the propagation.
Okay, sounds great.
Yeah. So with the additional propagation across the DOM tree, we, again, setting this, going off of the child to grandparental elements, when we set the properties to bubbles true and compose true without understanding how far those events can propagate, we can intercept by any ancestor component. So we could have a component on the page that's, 7 layers deep. And this is another one of the projects we go into in the book that shows exactly how far these events travel and where they travel to. We'll be looking at a diagram in a second. But it can be intercepted by any ancestor component, which opens you up to risk, because if you are passing record IDs and sensitive field values through the event detail without scoping how far that data travels and how much data we actually need, we can actually be exposing variables to JavaScript that doesn't need to see it. And then again, hard coding object and field API names such as strings, instead of importing them through the Salesforce schema, which will bypass compile time validation and field level security entirely. So again, we want to use Lightning Data Service with the Lightning UI record API functions, and then import our field names and API names with the Salesforce schema. Next slide.
All right.
All right. So this is an example from the Chapter 7 code where we have our imports at the top. We have the we're importing the Lightning modal module from Lightning modal for the Lightning Web Security friendly modal. And then we import, using Salesforce schema, the fields off of the change request object as well as the change request item. And one of the things that I am really happy with the cookbook is I tried to use Salesforce native objects that you can use in a Salesforce developer org. So you don't have to build this in your production org. You can build it in a sandbox. You can build it in a developer org and really play around with it. Because my favorite way to learn things is through that muscle memory and building stuff. So try to do that here. And we see that we assign the imported values into a fields object, an array called fields in line 23 down here. And then if you go to the next slide, we'll see the next chunk of code for this. So in the top left corner, we see the next chunk of code starting at line 33, where we are dispatching an event. And this is something that is only possible in the Lightning Web Security because in Lightning Locker, we have to have that wrapper component around our event to make sure that the DOM containment is not breached. So the reason for that, I would have to look at the documentation to be able to articulate it properly. So I will link some documentation in a second, but basically we need to have that wrapper class around it so that it propagates through the DOM appropriately rather than going straight from modal to the parental component. In Lightning Web Security, however, we can dispatch the event from the modal into the component that hosts the modal. So you'll see we have in the top left corner our change request modal extending Lightning modal. And then in the bottom right corner, we have the change request launcher extending the navigation mixin. So basically, the change request launcher says, hey, we have a modest feature flag, which we'll talk about. We'll look at this slide again in a couple of slides to discuss the feature flagging aspect of this. But if Lightning Web Security is enabled, we want to open the modal, and then you'll notice in lines 19 and 20, we have the event that stops the propagation of the event and then has a handle save success that passes that event detail in. So when the record is created, we have the, in line 43 in the top left, we have our record created event. We pass in the detail with the event.detail ID, which is the event in line 33 passed in as the parameter of the handle success event. And then we go ahead and pass that in and capture that event in lines 18 through 21 in the bottom right-hand corner. So this is something that, this is a forwards compatible component. This will not work with Lightning Locker. So the purpose of chapter 7 in the cookbook is to build something that's backwards compatible and forwards compatible. So you build both, and then we build a little feature flag, which we will discuss in a second. And have a good day, Stephen. Next slide. So your event properties, the bubbles and compose, are going to decide who gets your CRM data. So the custom event is going to default to bubbles false and compose false, and it should almost always be this way. This is the secure default, and there's very rarely a reason to override it. We will see exactly what this looks like in a diagram in a slide or two, but again, bubbles false and compose false means it's going to travel one layer up the DOM. Bubbles true and compose false means it travels like half a layer. And then bubbles true, compose true means it can travel as far as we'll let it. So again, very rarely a production reason to override and say bubbles true, compose true, but we will see some examples of how you can use this in the cookbook and in the next slide. So under Lightning Lock, previous slide.
Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. I said next slide. So under Lightning Locker, we have the strict DOM encapsulation that forces you to wrap the dispatching element in its own child component to pass events outside of the modal. This is going to be an architectural guardrail preventing like accidental data dissemination. Under Lightning Web Security, the same event is going to propagate freely because the cross namespace communication is permitted, and this makes the architecture simpler. But again, if we go to the previous slide with the code, we will see that we have to stop the propagation of the event. So if your event carries CRM data such as PII, record IDs, any of that good stuff in its detail property, and you've set compose to true, every component in the document object model tree above yours can listen for it. So this is something that if I were to have a malicious piece of code in an unmanaged package, and I am looking for a pretty common, pretty common event name, we can start capturing like capture on event handler, pretty common, boilerplate name. I can start listening for that, and then I can do something with that manipulative code. Next slide. So this is an example of 5 nested components. It's creating an event using events. And this is just a little, the GIF is from We Dream and OK, where I actually botched this demo. So hopefully I do better today. But we see that we're adding the event info. This is a Lightning data service that is going to add an event, an activity rather, into our Salesforce org. And if you look on the right-hand side of the screen, there is a kind of a rough diagram of where these events travel to and where they go. So I want to call out in the top right corner, we see that there is the add events event with the on add event handler, and Bubbles Bubbles is rated as true and Compose is also rated as true. So we can see that this travels up multiple layers in the DOM. And then if we have the set contact or select contact, those are each going to travel 1 layer because they are Bubbles false and Composed false. And then if you notice on the GIF, it'll happen in a second, we turn orange for a second. So that is what happens when we do Bubbles true and Composed false. It travels half a layer, basically. So the purpose of chapter 6 is to really get comfortable playing with events and deciding exactly how far your event should travel. So this is a component. It has a flow. It has a bunch of events. And the best way to show exactly where a Bubbles true and Composed false element goes, turn it orange. It's just kind of fun. So next slide. So one of my favorite things about Lightning Web Component development is we have the linter, ESLint, and ESLint has the ESLint config blocker package, which is going to check your JavaScript for API calls that Lightning Web Security will distort or block at runtime. There is in Chapter 1 and Chapter 7, 2 sections on ESLint in the cookbook, which I'm very happy with. If you run npm lint or npm run lint before every deployment, it'll go ahead and say like, hey, you borked this, let's fix it. And one of the convenient things about the npm run lint command is that a lot of times there will be fixable errors, and you can say npm run fix, if I'm remembering correctly, npm fix, and it'll fix the errors for you. So you don't have to do anything. You just run lint and then double check the robots work. So we are going to do that before every deployment. And one of the things I did in my most recent role was actually create a GitHub action that ran the ESLint before we deployed into UAT and an org. So if anyone has questions about that, I will be discussing Git branching strategies, hopefully at Forcelandia this year. So we also have the LWS distortion viewer, which is going to show you exactly which APIs are distorted and how. And again, distortion in this context means that Salesforce adds additional JavaScript to kind of manipulate and prevent you from doing bad stuff with your own JavaScript. We also have the LWS console, which lets you test component behavior interactively against the LWS sandbox without deploying to an org. There was a feature, 10 years ago now, where you used to be able to, I can't remember the name of it for the life of me because it's been so long, but you used to be able to have your component on the left-hand side, your HTML, your JavaScript, and then it would show you the example on the right-hand side. Salesforce took that away, and I'm still mad about it. But the LWS console is basically the same thing. So you have your code on the left, you see what it does on the right, and it calls out all of the issues that you might run into with Lightning Web Security. Next slide.
Let me see, sorry.
No worries. And so how to test so vulnerabilities never leave your machine. This is where we're going to come back to feature flags. So an easy way to do a feature flag in a Lightning Web component is if you use a custom permission. So create a custom permission, feature flag 123, whatever ticket you're working on, and say, give that feature flag custom permission its own permission set. And then you can assign this permission set to different users to say, hey, Evelyn is supposed to have this feature flag to test it. Matt's not going to, so Matt doesn't have the permission set with the custom permission. And then we can, all of it will be good. And Beach, oh my gosh, your comments are cracking me up. I'm not looking at the chat. So with the feature flagging, and we'll see this in the next slide in a second, but this is something that you build in Chapter 7 with a modest feature flag with that custom permission and a permission set. And then you can see your Lightning Web Security modal versus your Lightning Locker modal. And one of them's forwards compatible. Lightning Locker works with both, but Lightning Web Security only works if you have that custom permission enabled and if you have the Lightning Web Security turned on. So big thing, takeaway from this is if you are going to be switching from Lightning Locker to LWS, which ostensibly at some point you should, Lightning Locker, if you are in a pre-Winter 23 org, you will have Lightning Locker and you will need to switch to Lightning Web Security at some point. So test every component under both Lightning Locker and LWS. Best way to do this is with a feature flag. And then one architecture success is the other's type error. And this is something that, again, we explore in the cookbook. One of the big things that I ran into while doing this is definitely hard refresh your page after toggling the Lightning Web Security in the session settings, because caching your components in your web browser seems like a good idea, but if you're switching between architectures, it's going to kind of bork your components. And then if your org predates Winter 23, assume every existing LWC needs manual testing. ESLint catches distortions, not locker dependency logic. Next slide. And so this is an example of the code in, we already saw this slide, but we're showing it again for ease of navigation. We see in line 11 in the bottom right, we have if LWS enabled, and LWS enabled is a custom setting that is imported at the top, not a custom setting, a custom permission that is imported at the top of the LWC file. So if you go to the repo, you can climb into this change request launcher modal and then see what this looks like. But if we have LWS enabled with that custom permission and the person who is running the code and looking at the LWC has that permission set assigned, we'll say, hey, LWS permission set assigned, which not best practice, console logs in production code, boo, we don't like it. But just for ease to make sure we know what's going on, we have that console log. We open the LWS friendly modal. Otherwise, if we don't have this custom permission assigned, and we skip to line 23 and the else statement, we say Lightning Locker compatible, and then we do the change request modal with the open with the traditional modal structure. Next slide. So what to do before your next deployment. We all want to walk away with some good steps here. So verify that LWS is enabled in setup and session settings. If the checkbox is off, you are still in Lightning Locker and you will need to do a bunch of testing. We also want to audit every custom event for bubbles true or composed true. Every bubbles true, composed true should have a business justification for the propagation, because sometimes you need to travel up multiple layers, but generally you don't. So we want to use the default of false and false. We also want to replace raw Apex record operations with Lightning Data Service or wire adapters that enforce field level security automatically. We want to install our Locker ESLint config locker, run a full lint pass, and fix every distortion warning. And again, ESLint is amazing. It'll fix a lot of problems for you. You just have to audit them. Lastly, we want to import all object and field references through Salesforce schema instead of hard-coded strings. And we want to review the LWS distortion viewer for every flagged API in our component bundle. Next slide. So, common theme with Forcelandia and Matt's, only you can prevent bad code, right? So only you can secure the code. So LWS enforces namespace isolation. It does not enforce field level security, CRUD, input validation, or event propagation decisions. This is all on the developer and the architect. So we want to secure our components using Lightning Data Service with that Lightning UI record API over raw Apex as much as possible, and then just leave our event defaults at bubbles false and composed false unless absolutely necessary. We want to run ESLint with the LWS rule set and test under both security architectures before every deployment. And important, security is not a platform feature you inherit. It is a constant process. We are constantly evaluating our security processes and boundaries, and it is a coding decision you make on every component you ship. So take it seriously, keep it secret, keep it safe, y'all. Next slide.
And my favorite slide. Only you can prevent and contain data breaches in Salesforce, just like Evelyn just said. And my trusty shirt I love wearing here as well. So, but I think that was such an amazing speech. I think I learned a lot from it myself. So a couple things, and then we'll move on to Q&A, and then announce the winner of Evelyn's book after the Q&A is done. So Mr. Beach here, who's actually on the call, we'll be talking about what does Anthropic Mythos release have to do with Salesforce attack surface areas. All right, great. So if you want to sign up for that, that's coming up. Also, our QR codes we always have up here. If you want to get a copy of my book, you've got that QR code right there. Some more Salesforce security resources, including previous Salesforce office hours, sessions, and also if you want to get a copy of Evelyn's new book, you can get it right there. So let's go and open up for Q&A now for anyone who has a question. Everyone should be able to speak. So if you want to just speak or ask a question in the QA, go ahead. I think let's start off with Beach. Beach actually had an interesting thing. I'd love to hear everyone's take on this one. He said, if you had an LWC product manager genie who could grant you three wishes and add, change, or remove things, what would you wish for? Assuming you have to answer now and on the spot. Let's see all that in the chat. Anyone that, what three wish things would you wish for if you could sit right in front of a LWC product manager? He can make that change right now. What would that be? Anybody? We got EC 2022 private variable.
Yeah, so there are no private variables in Salesforce JavaScript because we use oh, I don't know what version of JavaScript we use, but it's not the most updated version of JavaScript, so there's no private variables yet. Throw them out there, y'all.
Let's see what else we have here. Let's see. So perfect event to reveal you're now at CrowdStrike. Replace Omni Studio outright with LWC drag and drop Axle.
I was quite excited by seeing Axel, that whole drag and drop thing, but Omni Studio being in limbo for several years before they finally can it is just anxiety inducing. Just put it out to pasture now.
Yeah, I know. Omni Studio causes problems left and right. I've seen like when we always have issues, it's always Omni Studio, OmniScript, and that kind of stuff. So, I mean, I think I mean, personally, for me, I guess my answer would be, I mean, I still feel like there's still not enough visibility into where the vulnerabilities are, what your code is doing. If they had some better, still some better tools as far as what's opened up and what's not. I mean, I think that's always going to be an answer. I don't think you'll ever get to perfect, but I think I mean, I still feel like there's just not enough visibility into what things are doing in Salesforce.
On that line, a better way of dealing with static resources that's designed for the web, especially with React on core.
Oh yeah, 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 for sure. I'm also interested in the new React that's still been in beta for I don't know how long now, but hopefully it's coming soon. But how that's going to play into security as well, because it's in its own space from what I've read anyway. And when you're deploying that, how does that interact with the rest of Salesforce? Does it not? What's the security look like on that? Where are the assets kept? All that kind of stuff. I think that's another going to be an interesting topic for sure. And interesting. So
Yeah.
does, yep.
Oh, and I was going to say, just to throw out another Salesforce virtual event, the Denver admin and developer groups will be having observability office hours, not office hours, but like an observability community event in the next couple of weeks. So check out the Denver groups because they're awesome.
Great. Anyone have any Q&A? I mean, feel free to just ask away if you have a Q&A for Evelyn before we announce our
Well,
winner.
I'd quite like to see you come back at some point, Evelyn, to look at the seam scene, certainly with like event monitoring and stuff, and bring that together for your new journey.
Yep. All
Oh,
right,
I would love
Rachel.
that.
Hi, Matt. Hi, Evelyn.
Hello.
Hi. I was that anonymous first. I don't know why I put it in as anonymous, but I had that question about if we do opt out of sharing custom, and it said it was answered like, so apologies if it was said. I may have missed it, but just curious if opting out of that, if we have agents going in our org, is that going to get impacted? I think that's what I want to make sure of before I change anything.
I mean, from the article at least I saw, I didn't see anything that gave any clarity on that. I was kind of wondering the same thing myself. So I think there's still need more info on that. Maybe there might be a Salesforce help article or something, but I doubt it. But I think test it and see, and maybe also you could raise a support ticket, see if you can get a little bit more information on that. So
Thank you.
yep. And then Christopher just asked a question. What was your most single important new learning while writing the book?
I don't want to write another one. No, but seriously, the single most important thing that I learned, I got to dive in on a lot of rabbit holes because I think that the best way to learn things is to teach them to other people. So I learned a lot about my own limitations of knowledge on the platform, as well as, different ways to explain things to people. And honestly, the chapter that got the best feedback is chapter 15. It's on debugging your Apex and LWCs. And the way I wrote it is you actually cause the errors so you know what it looks like when you see the errors, and then you work backwards and fix them. So that was an interesting exercise in learning. So oh yeah, the data weave message. It was beach. I learned a lot about data weave. I broke Salesforce developer orgs by trying to seed 200,000 records with a CSV. And it let me do it, but then it worked. So I did a really good data weave error. So learned a lot about data weave, and then yeah, I had a lot of fun with it. I've said this before, but I had a lot of health issues while writing the book, which is why it took so long. So I also learned my husband loves me a lot, and he took care of me. So very good learnings all around.
Yeah, I concur with you as far as the the time it takes to write a book and and the pain. I mean I'm funny stopping my book. I started writing my book when my son was 1 month old. I think I'm crazy, but it was kind of by accident. But anyway, I've got another question for everyone else. I mean, just on the security talk, while we have this amazing LWC expert here. So what kind of things, I mean, would you feel that are concerning to you or have been concerning to you from a security perspective when you've been writing your LWC, or what kind of things do you feel like that that you feel concerned about literally as you're implementing?
So one of the big things is, and we didn't actually touch on this, we only touched on Lightning Web Security and Lightning Locker. But so this could be a whole other talk. With the CSS clickjacking, if you use automatic in any of your CSS to like automatically center something or automatically resize something, you can introduce an opportunity for clickjacking. So you have to use the SLDS classes as often as possible. One, because it's going to make your stuff look good. Two, because Salesforce builds in that security for you. So you have to worry about it. You don't have to not worry about it, but you get to worry about it a little bit less. And then doing all that. The other thing that I want to bring up is with the cross-site request forgery, don't do DML in your connected callbacks. Bad idea. That is a great way to get your stuff jacked and then insert bad records. And then finally, validate your inputs. This is something that you can do in a variety of ways. I like regular expressions. There's escape single quotes. There's a number of ways to validate and escape everything. And then, yeah, follow your content security policies as well. You can set those in setup and make sure they are good.
Yep. I love what, Beach just put in here as well in the chat, like state management, API platform cache, keeping static resource assets up to date with supply chain attacks, updates for and AI security. I mean, all of that, I mean, for me, platform cache has always scared me, but because of, what can go in there, if someone could manipulate it and you weren't doing that right, I think that's one of the things that always was a little bit, I was always veered away from it just because I don't trust it entirely personally, and just because it's too easy for something that you didn't mean to go in there, or someone to manipulate it. If someone wrote a class that was insecure and it's shared across the org, especially if it's the org level platform cache, then all of a sudden it'd be so easy for someone to bring that in there. Cat. Yeah. The other thing I think is good to talk about is just just generally with look. I think there was what was it, a few weeks ago or so, there was some. I forget who it was, but it was one of the open repos that was social engineered, and there's the dog. So hard to concentrate with the dog on the screen. No worries. But I mean, back to kind of what Beach was saying there with static resources. Do you really know what your developers are putting into your static resources? Right? I mean, if you're actually interested, I've got a whole article on our website about social engineering open source repos and static resources. I mean, if your developers just download a static resource, how do you know that that static resource file is safe? Are you vetting those static resources? Are you scanning them? I think there's a lot of things you should be considering when putting those static resources and sharing them across your org, having a process in place for those. All right, great. Anyone have anything else? Any other questions? All right, great. So I think we'll do one more thing and then we'll announce the winner. So since you're going to be doing the next session, why don't you give a little bit intro for everybody?
Yeah, we've been looking at what's been happening with, Mythos and essentially open AI's versions of security AIs at the minute, what it's been finding and how to kind of stay ahead. There's a whole security framework we've been looking at to help you kind of plan and assess. And we're going to be looking at it in terms of a security audit. So not hands-on code or what the code's producing or what the models are producing, but more how you can plan and assess your security environment and get ahead of it. What audits, what controls, and how to act.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting. And also, I think not sure so much about Mythos lately with the some of the breaches itself. It kind of makes you feel rethink that if Mythos itself is being breached, then
Oh,
so
that's it. And now there's a rumor of OpenAI's one going a bit rogue as well in terms of who's got access. So
geez.
all to play with.
I think which then opens up the last question that I really had in my mind here was also when you're bringing AI into that LWC development, because especially now if you think about with Salesforce's headless APIs for the MCP they finally released and all that kind of stuff, what does that really mean for your LWC code? Especially and also I know you could develop your own front end for your LW. You don't need to use Salesforce's the Agentforce UI, you could have use the Agentforce APIs to develop your own Agentforce. So if you're not securely developing your code, then you don't need to worry just about the AI prompts you're doing, but also how you're implementing that AI in your LWCs so people can't do different types of injections or take advantage of it or other things like that. So I don't know, Evelyn, did you do any research on that kind of development in the LWCs or anything like that?
No, I did not, and I need to, which I'm excited about. But a former boss of mine, Lily Biting, made another packed book on experience clouds and configuring them properly. So that's definitely a topic that more books to read. So highly recommend her book as
Oh
well.
yeah, I am very interested in that book. I think I know that book because it's kind of like the sister book to my book. So, so I talk about the same things. So okay, great. Well, if we don't have any other questions, we got 4 minutes left, so we will go ahead and get to the wrap up. And I can we behind the scenes kind of ran our little number generator, and we got so Connor, you are the winner of the book. Yay, congrats. And so I think we'll reach out to you to arrange the to get that shipped out to you. And
I I
Mhm.
already have a copy,
Oh,
Matt, so if you want to give it away to somebody else who doesn't
oh,
have a
okay.
copy yet.
Well then, sure, not a problem. Tristan, could you run another name through our list there so we can have a second?
I got it. And while I do that, Evelyn, I just had a quick question for you. I'm just going to run this number generator, but quick question, Evelyn. Talking a little bit more about Gen AI, like, is there a top tip for developers right now who are trying to balance velocity, but also thinking about security, getting that pressure around AI adoption? Like, is there just one tip? And I have a nasty cold, otherwise I come off camera.
My biggest tip is read the output. Like, there are so many people with the vibe coding that just like put the prompts in and then put the prompt in when it doesn't work and put the prompt and oh, it deploys. We're good. You're not good. You need to read it. You need to peer review it. You need to say in your peer review, hey, I generated this with Gen AI. Can you triple check it for me? And I think that a lot of what is happening right now is because of Gen AI, there is a lot of push, there's less pressure on developers and more pressure downstream because it's less work for me, but now it's more work for my peer reviewer, right? So take on some of that shoulder some of that responsibility and only you can prevent bad code, right? So
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I'm completely with you on that one because I mean I've been doing a lot of research on AI as well, not just Agentforce, and doing a lot of AI development. And there are a lot of lessons learned. A lot of times it does writes really great code. I've even written my own security assessment, instructions for AI that, and there's a lot of things, but still it's going to do weird things. And so you cannot just blindly deploy your code with AI, whether it's Vibe, whether it's Claude, whether it's something else. I mean, it's not perfect. And so just same thing with a human, you would not deploy code that a human would deploy without reviewing it. The same should be true for an agent. All right, so we got our next our number two. Hopefully you don't already have the book. So Amber, if you are, yeah, I see you're here. So you are the winner of Evelyn's book, since Connor passed the torch.
I am here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Thank you so much.
Congrats.
Oh my God, I've been wanting this book and I didn't know you were giving it out today until I joined. So I'm so happy about that. Evelyn, I actually do have a question for you if you're still open to taking questions.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. I don't have a lot of questions because I'm more of a junior developer. I'm a BA for my day job, so I'm still sort of figuring things out. But in one of your slides, you said to use custom permissions as feature flags to gate LWS code paths and roll out to testers before the full org. I wanted to know from like a QA and a UAT standpoint rather than a developer standpoint, like how can we be testing for those vulnerabilities that might exist that the devs didn't catch?
Ooh, so I think this is a two-part question. In order to test feature flags, you want to test during user acceptance testing, you test flag on and flag off. And then in terms of testing for the vulnerabilities that the developers might have missed, oh my gosh, so my original degree was in chemical engineering. Life happened. I went to network engineering instead, but I had a professor in chemical engineering that if she could find a way to break your code, you got 50% off of the assignment. So like just default, you would not pass the assignment. And I think that's why I'm kind of good at what I do today because you just have to do everything. So if there's a text input, keyboard smash it, add some numbers. If there's a button, click it, right click it, and test as much as possible and really try. And this is one thing that generative AI has actually been beneficial for me is if I'm like, hey, I have this code, give me some ideas on how to break it, it'll come up with stuff. So that is a helpful way that business analysts can use Gen AI to help break the code and then give that feedback to the dev.
That is so helpful. Thank you so much. I feel like I already bring that sort of trying to break it approach because I do have a background in like coding. Had a technical degree and I had some pretty similar professors, maybe not so hardcore, but especially when it came to data validation. Yeah, so thank you for that perspective.
I love that. I wish you could do the same thing with SIs. If I can break the code, I only pay 50%. Anyway, so thank you everyone. Amber, Rick on the team here, he's on the call. He'll reach out to you to coordinate getting that book sent out to you. And then besides that, everyone see you on Beaches Talk in a couple weeks. Thank you so much again, Evelyn, and everyone else for the questions and attention.
Thank you for having me. Happy Thursday.
All right, thanks. Bye.